My face is all red. I just came off the tennis court and I needed to vlog because of an email I just received from my friend this morning where he informed me about June Chu, the dean from Yale, who has been put on leave because of supposedly offensive reviews that she posted on Yelp. I have screen capped one of the reviews and I'm going to include the link below in my YouTube post. You will see that these reviews are no different than something that I might have recorded in a story, and they're clearly not intended to cause permanent psychological trauma to any sensitive minority group. She used the words white people to denote uneducated people with no taste in the context of a Chinese Asian food review. It's exactly the kind of thing that I would do, which I do all the time, which actually I did the other day when I was having dinner with a good friend of mine at a Chinese restaurant. This is course 16. This is a restaurant where there is no menu. You just have to put up and shut up, and they start bringing food to you. And Ming just told me that they keep on bringing food. So now we're in course 16, and as Ming said, don't go all white on me. Because we Asians always think that we can eat a hell of a lot more than white people. June Chu did nothing different than what I just described to you, which is use the expression white people as a casual metonym in a colloquially written review on Yelp, and it was no greater infraction than that, and at that, the use of the word infraction is quite harsh, I would say. So please look at the reviews for yourself and be your own judge. In today's day and age of fake news, incomplete reporting, inflammatory, engineered polemic, it's incumbent on us responsible citizens to actually get educated, read thoroughly, do additional research even, because we may be embarking on a tirade which isn't actually backed up by facts, let alone logical argumentation. What I'm saying is don't contribute to the problem by being ignorant, by blurting out a knee-jerk reaction. If you do that, you're no better than Donald Trump or Steve Bannon or Saturday Night Live. I went to Columbia, which is considered the most left-wing of all the Ivy League universities. I am part of that liberal elite which supposedly gets up in arms about these types of offensive statements by bigoted people like June Chu. Then on the other side, June Chu knows where she came from. I mean, I can identify very strongly with her. She has benefited from the regime of openness, liberal, progressive values about thinking and scholarship and freedom of expression and debate her entire life. That much is obvious from her background, and that much is obvious from her education. So to think that she's some kind of off-the-rails bigot leading the student body awry is absolutely absurd. Since the election of Trump, we have had a lot of, I would call them left-wing avenging angels on the campuses of America's most elite universities trying to redress, maybe, in their mind, a political imbalance by being even more zealously politically correct than ever before. And in the process, they have embarked on a perverse and misguided crusade with victims like the June Chus of the world. In the wake of Trump's election, there has been a spate of, for lack of a better and more elegant term, I'm just going to say outrageous PC bullshit instead of trying to coin a new felicitously worded catchphrase each instance. Here I read from the week. Oxford University has apologized for suggesting that students who avoid eye contact could be guilty of quote-unquote racial microaggressions after it was accused of discriminating against autistic people. Now, I don't actually have any issue with the policy of racial microaggressions. My first reaction was to say, oh my God, yet another case of hypersensitivity. But when I looked at the actual policy and read it this morning, I realized that there was a lot of substance to it. And I can speak from personal experience that those small cues of questioning your ethnicity or identity every day do wear a person down if you're subjected to it continuously. It's a repeat. I have no problem with the racial microaggressions memo from Oxford University. The ridiculous, insane PC part of it is that certain students at the university reacted with outrage at the policy because they believe that this policy discriminates against autistic people who are unable physically to look their fellow students in the eye, and that therefore this policy needed to be rescinded. That is an extreme and absurd example of political correctness, and brings political correctness to a new high, or perhaps I should say low. Indeed, so low that I would call that a satirical nadir, practically. The week then goes on in the same paragraph. Meanwhile, delegates at the National Union of Students annual conference were urged not to cheer or clap. In order to avoid excluding deaf people, they were told to use, quote-unquote, jazz hands instead. It's not yet known how the new policy will affect the visually impaired. That's what I love about the week. It takes no prisoners, and nor does it take itself too seriously. This is actually one of the articles which I read, which I had been planning to share, which gave me a giggle, but then it was the June Chu episode which really pushed me over the edge and led me to do a full-fledged blog post. Those are two examples in England of excessive political correctness. And just a few minutes ago, I got an email from the same friend who flagged this June Chu episode to me, stating that University of Michigan students objected to the traditional decor of dark wood paneling in a university building because they felt that it was oppressive and suggested a dominant white male atmosphere. The fact that it got any airtime at all is frankly insane. The reason this matters is this type of irrational, overzealous criticism is actually polarizing political debate further. And that's the last thing that we need, especially in the United States, because already it's been very rare, even before the election of Trump, for Republicans and Democrats to sit at the same table in, for example, polite society in New York City. Those of you who live in a big city in the United States know exactly what I'm talking about. The second reason is that when we only permit certain kinds of content to be expressed out loud on campus, whether it's students or professors or any staff, it's essentially a politicization of the campus. If you permit this tyranny of political correctness, what happens is, logically, you would even politicize the admissions and hiring process at a university, where you would be, you could actually, why not? Why not ask a student what is their political viewpoint before they can be admitted to an elite bastion of learning like Berkeley or Columbia? That's a logical extension of what's going on here. That is the most damning argument for why this type of behavior needs to be nipped in the bud, because it's its own version of McCarthyism. The third reason that I take exception to this whole June Chu thing is that I can imagine some of the people behind these movements on college campuses, these extremely expensive college campuses. And many, many times they're going to be pampered rich kids who have grown up in the breast of champagne socialism in places like the Upper West Side, where part of their birthright is being the avenging angel of these historically oppressed minority groups and to be tireless champions of political correctness. I cannot believe how holier than thou students are these days. I mean, I would hate to be a student who felt like I had to take on the historical burden of the prejudice received at the hands of all the yellow, brown, handicapped, gay, disadvantaged, debilitated people in the world. That would be a crushing burden. I mean, now I find it hard to believe that students who are 18 to 22 years old can really understand what that means when they're going to an elite university. A lot of the people who complain about this are privileged, spoiled, pampered white kids who don't know the first thing about actual racism or prejudice, like June Chu and me, for example. We have actually experienced racism, intolerance, and prejudice. That's my last axe to grind.